I'm your host, Scott Norton, and welcome to At Large. On this show, I talk to world-class creatives who use business to bring their ideas to life. We'll hear about their creative practices, their most interesting stories, and the lessons that'll inspire you the way that they've inspired me. My guest today is Gabe Whaley, CEO and co-founder of MSCHF. MSCHF is a high-output, for-profit art collective behind hundreds of radical and delightful projects. These range from the Jesus shoes, which contain holy water from the River Jordan, to anime skinned attack software, to the mega-viral Big Red Boots. He's been dragged into court for ticking off big companies, sold a laptop full of viruses for over $1 million, and gotten MSCHF represented by Perrotin, a leading global contemporary art gallery. Softspoken and understated, Gabe has an unlikely history for a provocateur. He grew up in rural North Carolina, insulated from popular culture, and attended West Point, where he learned military discipline before dropping out. After working dead-end jobs back home, he flew up to New York City wearing an ill-fitting suit for a long-shot interview with Buzzfeed, where he landed a job working on viral content. And from that point on, Gabe lit the internet on fire and has been leading a scorched earth campaign ever since. But today, please enjoy my talk with Gabe about his one-of-a-kind company. This is an inspiring space to be in. Tell us where we are currently.
We're at the MSCHF HQ, which I will never reveal the exact location of that. But we're in like a carved out corner of stuff that people are allowed to see. Mostly because, and this is crazy, but when we started, it was so stupid, but we were like, oh yeah, we're MSCHF and this is going to be so fun and we're going to like take over the world and be crazy, whatever, knowing nothing because we were just idiots back then. And so we had this space 20 minutes south of here, also like garage warehouse on the street. And in our youthful idiocy, we painted our name on the wall. So like,
not knowing that you were going to be,
we didn't know what was going to happen. So we're like, oh, cool. So MSCHF. So we like did this massive graffiti on the wall. And then what we realized was, unfortunately, you could actually see that from the Williamsburg Bridge. So people coming into town from Manhattan and leaving Brooklyn could look down and see where we were. And then all of a sudden, like, things started to happen. We started to push things out into the world and people would talk about it. And so the volume of unwanted visitors started to go up a lot.
I normally start these interviews biographically with people's lives. And I think you've led a fascinating life, but I'd actually like to flip it around. And
you're going to tell me your story.
We've done episodes like that, but instead of talking about your childhood first, I want to talk about your childhood later. Okay, and instead, I want to get people into the mindset of MSCHF and into understanding what MSCHF is. Sure. And so there have been many things that people have said about MSCHF and other people's words used to describe it. Mm-hmm. So, for instance, a recent article described what you make as objects that look like they belong in a hot topic managed by a MoMA curator on acid. In your own words, what is MSCHF?
I'm inherently very lazy, so typically I answer that question by saying MSCHF is whatever you want it to be, or MSCHF is whatever is most convenient to me at the time. So one quick anecdote about that. We've done several court appearances because of lawsuits or various things that sort of like prickle the legal First Amendment department of like every major corporation. And it just so happens that in court, in front of a judge, it behooves MSCHF to 100% unabashedly be an artistic entity, an art collective, an artist. The convenient thing is that it is also true. We are represented by a gallery. We have works in museums all over the world. But then on the flip side, we are like so aggressively commercial that it makes you question like, what is the intention of all of this in the first place, right? Are they a brand trying to make money? Are they a business trying to like take your money? Is it an artist trying to like make a statement? MSCHF is just my excuse and my friend's excuse to make all the ideas that are in our heads, make them real and put them out into the world and then go do it again.
Beautiful.
That's what it is.
Beautiful. Yeah. And so let's talk about some of the concepts and the stories behind some of the most compelling MSCHF works. Mm-hmm. Let's start with a relatively recent one, which is and if I don't have the titles of these exactly, please
That's
pardon
okay.
me,
Yeah.
but the Met sink.
Oh, you're going to make me talk about that on the record? In this lens, Your Honor, Mischief is an artist, and we can do no wrong as an artist. So there's this infamous paradox called the ship of Theseus, where, harkening back to like the days of Greek and Roman mythology. So imagine you have a wooden ship, and over a 7-year period of time, one piece of wood at once, you are essentially like swapping out a piece of wood on the ship until ultimately the ship is just completely new material, but in the same form and structure that it was when you started. And the paradox is it the same ship or is it a completely different ship? That also kind of applies to like stuff that people say about the human body, like your cells regenerate every 7 or 8 or 10 years. Is it the same or is it different? So for us, we really loved that paradox, and we were like, can we apply this to a sink that we happened to find in the American wing of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. So what we did was we identified the sink, we found all the serial numbers, we identified all the parts, we ordered all of them, we assembled it here, complete like one-to-one replica exactly down to the serial number. And then over many months, we would go into the Met, one piece at a time, swap it out until by the end, we had their sink. And in the Met is a sink that's identical to the one that was there, but is the Mischief sink. And if you actually like look at some of the pipe fittings, we have carved Mischief into those pieces. So technically we have a piece in the Met right now, and the sink that I'm not going to say that we stole it. The sink that we happen to have in our possession now is making its rounds in galleries all over the United States.
Oh, it's being shown in galleries across the U.S.
Yep.
And can you talk about how you practically got the pieces in and out?
We were very sneaky about it. I mean, look, the security is important. We didn't break any rules, but it just so happens that like you are able to take in stuff, just enough stuff at a time to be able to like do something like this, and we were able to do it.
One of the reasons why I think this is such a beautiful piece is because the idea of a Mischief artwork living in the Met, but not living in a gallery, living in a bathroom, is so perfect for Mischief.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
So perfect for Mischief, right?
And we actually didn't publicize where it was in the Met at the beginning, and people found it immediately. And so we were seeing like documentation of people like making videos trying to like go to every single, like speed run every single bathroom in the Met, which there are a lot of them. People were like crowding up around the different bathrooms trying to like get a sneak peek. It was in the men's bathroom, so it was harder for a woman to go and like see it. So it created hopefully not like a harmful level of chaos, but like an intriguing level of chaos.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow. Tax Heaven 3000.
Oh, amazing. That's such a good one for you to mention because most people don't talk about it.
This is one of my favorites.
I think it is one of the all-time like best. Tax Heaven is an example of an idea. And this idea actually was pretty big, but in like a very specific community. Actually, I have it here.
Oh, you've got Tax Heaven.
Tax Heaven 3000. This is our TurboTax competitor. So what we did was, I mean, we all know like TurboTax, it's a glorified online form. You put in your information, it's super standardized, and then you like pay money to get it done. And they have sort of like unhealthy control monopoly over the industry through like their relationships with lobbyists in DC and all that stuff.
And dark patterns around.
And the dark patterns, totally.
Purporting it to be free and then
Yes.
basically layering in costs and upselling.
And
It's
they're,
like a
scaring
sneaky
you.
freemium, non-freemium model.
Totally. So there's a lot of like issues with that. And we thought there would be nothing more interesting than to like juxtapose the worlds of tax preparation software with the other direction that the world is currently going in, which is anime. Everything is becoming anime. So we're like, let's make our TurboTax competitor. It's free. And it's basically in the form of a anime dating simulator where you go on a cute little date with Iris in a Japanese cafe.
Iris.
And yeah, exactly. And she asks you perfectly normal standard questions that you would get on a date. Like, what do you do for work? And are you single? Let's make sure you're single. If not, we should talk about it. And as the conversation progresses, the conversation gets a little bit more intimate, like, how much money do you make? Do you own a car?
Do you own your own company?
Yeah,
or do you work for someone?
Yeah.
What's the name
and
of your
then it
employer?
starts to get like really juicy, and she'll eventually ask you, so what's your social security number? But if you successfully complete the date, you will have gone through enough of honestly what looks just like the TurboTax user flow to successfully file your taxes. And we had 20,000 people use this to file their taxes for the 2022 filing year.
Wow.
So in 2023.
Fantastic.
Which was great. But the funniest thing was, so this was kind of going off in like that tech community, software community, but also the anime community, which is huge. And then also like the gaming community. And the funniest things were going down online where like people were basically split into two factions on like Twitter and Reddit and Discord and all these places. One faction was, for the love of God, do not give the cute anime girl your social security number. And then the other faction was, dear Lord, I'm risking everything for the cute anime girl. She has my social security number. This is like a great example actually of the kind of thing that we aspire to do, which is like on the surface, it tells one story is just sort of like, and not even a story, it's just sort of like a weird sort of like interesting thing, experience. But the deeper you dive into it, if you choose to, and not everybody does it and not everyone has to, but you can like keep going down these layers where it just gets more interesting and interesting and interesting. And you start to uncover more that it kind of like says about the world around us, right? And my favorite description of a lot of the things that we do is like, it's actually sort of like a multifaceted mirror, just reflecting back your own reality, but like a slightly different point of view, right? We're not saying anything new. You know what I mean? Like it's not really that. It's just sort of like a magnification of the present, an acceleration of the present.
Absolutely.
I think that's like, I don't know, that's sort of like the thing that we aspire to do. It's a core activity of an artist to notice more, to notice things that other people don't notice, and then isolate them and put them in new contexts so that people understand them in more stark relief. I mean, the classic ready-made of Duchamp and the quote-unquote fountain of the urinal is there's mischief written all over that, basically. Yeah. You know what's crazy though is like I didn't really know about any of these things until we got started. Now some of my colleagues do. Like some of my partners did art school and had more of that context. But I think the really interesting thing about mischief is all of us come from such different backgrounds actually. Like most of us did not have an art background. Some of us had a design background, but also like not really. But what gave us so much, I guess, like kind of unbridled ambition, but also perspective is just we were all sort of like these outsiders throughout our childhoods, throughout our teenage years, even throughout like early adulthood, where we weren't really part of the in crowd. We weren't in the scene. We were always on the outside looking in. And I actually think we never even desired to be on the inside. So very naturally, all the work that we create is a commentary on what we're seeing on the inside without us wanting to even be accepted at the end of the day. And that's what gives us so much power to continue.
Absolutely.
Because we're actually very content with where we are.
Yes. Yeah. The outsider remaining an outsider. And of course, I mean, the secret is when you do those outsider activities and those creative activities, people will crowd around you. And you're going to be your own insider.
Totally. And we even get, like, we can feel the pull to become an insider, right? Like, each of these spheres that we play in, from fine art to fashion to collectibles to technology to media to advertising, like, wherever we are, there is a pull for mischief to, like, start to be more embedded into that institution, into that scene, and to start becoming a part of it, and then to ultimately start creating output for that crowd.
Yes.
And I think that's the biggest trap.
Yes.
That is, and it's the most tempting thing because it's such a juicy opportunity to finally be like, not just accepted, but propped up by the people who rejected you
Absolutely.
at the beginning.
Yeah. Don't pander to the system.
Right. So the good thing is everyone here is just inherently extremely lazy. So it takes a lot of work to be on the inside, and no one here actually wants to do it.
The persistence of chaos.
Wow. That is a deep cut. That comes from a long time ago. That might be 7 years ago.
What is it?
Yeah. It's kind of absurd, but it's just an air-gapped laptop computer with I think like 5 to 7 viruses on it that contributed to something like hundreds of billions of dollars of destruction at some point or another. And somehow we were able to like get them and put them on a computer that is like air-gapped and sealed so that they can't get out. But it sounds like really dangerous, and it totally is. But the cool thing about it is like when you're looking at it as an object, it feels so benign because it's just a laptop computer that looks like any other laptop computer. But once you have the knowledge of like what's in there, it's like, I don't know. It's like
it's
you're
be like looking
like
at a vial of the COVID virus.
100%, or like you have that button that presses that launches the nuclear weapons, right? Like you're looking at something that feels so dangerous, but on the surface is so benign unless you know.
The reason I bring it up is because, correct me if I'm wrong, did it sell at auction?
It did.
For $1.3 million.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's why I think it's quite interesting.
Yep.
Because anybody can put viruses on a laptop.
Yeah.
Why was there a market for this machine?
Honestly, we have no idea.
Who sold it?
I mean, we sold it.
Okay.
Yeah, we sold it. I can't talk about who bought it.
That's fine.
But it was sort of the thing of like a lot of the other things from those early days where like we had no institutional knowledge or experience selling things or understandings of like our markets or our audience, or even like really having an audience, right? Like we have a larger audience now, but there was a time at the beginning where we had no audience and we just relied on like word of mouth for people to share things, discover things, reshare them.
Right.
So it was shocking to us. And I think there was something about like how bombastic the concept was. And also sort of like it's a relic of like a pretty important thing that has happened multiple times in history. And then the auction mechanism, the timing, like markets were good. It was like 2018.
Remarkable.
Hopefully it shows up in a museum here pretty soon. That's what I've heard.
Leaderboard ATM.
Yeah. Okay.
Which I saw in person at Art Basel in Miami.
Amazing. That's before we knew each other too, I think.
That's right. It was the end of 2022.
Yeah.
You and I had only an email relationship at that point.
Got it. So here's the thing about the ATM leaderboard. I'll describe what it is and then why it's interesting. The ATM leaderboard is just an ATM machine, normal functioning ATM machine. You can check your balance. You can withdraw cash. Normal, no tricks. We actually like got it from a normal ATM company.
Right.
Turns out it's pretty inexpensive to do that.
Yeah.
And you can set the fees to whatever you want. Mm-hmm. That's why you see so many of them around. The only difference is we installed a digital leaderboard screen as an extension of the ATM machine that would rank people based on how much money is in their remaining bank balance. Now, the interesting thing is, and I don't know if you know this, when you withdraw money from the ATM machine, they always take your photo. I don't know if people know that.
I did not know that.
They always take your photo. That's a standard part of the information that an ATM machine takes from you. So if you do it next time, look for the camera. It's there. It's typically there right around where they give you the cash. So
it makes sense, but it's also curious that there isn't more. I mean, I feel like in the UK they would have to tell you that, I think legally.
Yeah.
But in the US,
I don't know, So there's like a certain amount of information that the ATMs receive that is standard when you do a transaction. And it's sort of like the stuff that you see on the receipt, right? Like when you get the receipt, it's not going to show your actual debit card number or anything like that, but it will show you like time and date, amount of the transaction, amount in your balance. And then the other thing that people don't know as much about is the photo. So we were like, we actually don't have to really hack the ATM machine. We just have to pass the information that we already receive up to this leaderboard in a visual interface so that people can sort of see like the ranking of wealth.
Yes.
And we're like, this is such a crazy idea, making people compete to see who has like the most to the least money, using like an everyday device that everyone's familiar with. Amazing. We must do it. But here's the thing about MSCHF is it's not enough to do the thing. You have to figure out where to put the thing. And if you're going to do it, you have to do it as deeply into the system that you're trying to like, I guess, critique as possible, right? And we call that distribution, which I think that's like a hot word for entrepreneurs or whatever. But we refer to distribution as like, how does an idea spread? And how do you boil that down to like the most tactile, like physical essence? Like, where does it go?
Yeah.
Who sees it? Who interacts with it in a way that gives this concept the most power to spread the idea? So we're like, okay, we have this ATM machine. Where do we put it? Do we put it out here in Brooklyn? Do we put it in Times Square? That's not bad. Around this time, we heard of this art fair called Art Basel. And I guess we had heard of it before, but people talked about it more because
it's also a social event.
It's like a social event. And Maurizio Catalan had just done the banana duct tape thing and everyone's losing their minds. And so there's that plus like the socialite aspect of it. And it's in Miami. And, you know, there are good and bad things about Miami. And in my opinion,
but showing off wealth is something that happens in Miami.
There's good material in Miami, right? And so we were like, wait, this thing has to go in Art Basel, Miami. No question about it. Okay, how do you do that? So I actually find a way to cold call like the head of North America for Art Basel. And I, in my like, again, my youthful ignorance, I'm just like, hey, so we have this ATM machine with a leaderboard that ranks people based on how much money they have in their bank account. How do we get this into Art Basel? I would like to get a booth. I would like to have a booth in Art Basel so that we can have our ATM machine. And they're like, no, definitely not. That's not how it works. You have to be with a gallery.
Yeah.
And so I come back 2 weeks later. I'm like, we incorporated a gallery. It's called MSCHF Gallery. How can MSCHF Gallery have a booth so that we can put the ATM machine there? And they're like, no, that's not how it works either. You have to be part of these like pre-vetted galleries that we have, right? And that was my introduction to the gallery ecosystem. I did not know about galleries.
2022 was your first introduction to the gallery ecosystem?
Did not know anything about galleries or the relationship between artists and galleries. I did not know that as an artist, the only way you could ever imagine having a livelihood is being represented by a blue chip gallery. I did not know that. I did not know who the galleries were, which galleries have power, which ones don't have power. I didn't know the relationship between auction houses, galleries, art advisors, freeholds, like I knew nothing about it. All I knew was they gave me a list of galleries that had booths at Art Basel, and I started calling them. And I tried to talk to all of those, and I pretty much talked to all of them. But oddly enough, through like another sort of parallel path, I had started spending a little bit more time in Paris because some of our projects had been getting picked up by like that luxury fashion world, primarily in Europe. And I think I'm lucky that I met all the good ones in that space. And one of those people that I met, her name's Sarah Andelman, who is the founder of the very like legendary OG department store in Paris called Colette. So Sarah has been like a really strong friend and supporter since the beginning. And we're talking more about like the art world. And I'm asking her like, what does it mean to be at Art Basel and how does this work? And she's like, you know who you should talk to? You should talk to Emmanuel Perrotin.
Yes.
And I'm like, that sounds pretty good. That was on the list that Art Basel gave me. Cool, let's do it. Because all I want to do is just put the ATM machine where I think it will do the best. I was not thinking about a world of being in the like fine art scene or doing gallery shows or museums. That wasn't really on the radar. So she connects me to Emmanuel, and it's still in the pandemic. I think it was like end of 2020, early 2021. We have a 30-minute scheduled Zoom call that became 2 hours. And it concluded with, yes, the ATM machine is going to show up at Perrotin's booth in Miami Art Basel 2022. But also, MSCHF must do a show in my gallery, right?
Give me more, yeah.
You're like getting the pull. And for us, we're like, okay.
Because you want to be able to say, we represent this artist.
Yeah,
you don't want to say,
totally.
oh, they needed an outlet. You want to say,
Right.
this is MSCHF. We represent them.
Right.
Of course we'll do a show.
Totally. And the thing about Emmanuel is he's kind of fundamentally an outsider to that world too. Like just with his origin story and the way that he got started. And he has a track record of taking bets on like who are now very successful artists who also were sort of like maybe the rejects of like the fine art world. And so, you know, part of it is like relationships are important and this feels like good people. And it's the opportunity to place the ATM machine. And so we did it. We went to Miami, we set up the ATM machine. And on the first day of the opening, which is like the private viewings of like the most highest net worth collectors.
Yeah, the vernissage perhaps. Or
Crickets.
Oh.
Devastating. So we're like standing around.
No
like,
one used it?
Yeah, no one would use it. In fact, they would walk past it and maybe they would speed up their walk as they walked past it. These wealthy people wanted nothing to, they knew that this thing was making fun of them and they wanted nothing to do with it. And so on day one, we were honestly like very disappointed. We were just like, wow, way off the mark. Like this just, people aren't really into this. But day two, it starts to open up a little bit, right? It's like, I think the other early viewing, but they're like letting more people in and people start using it. And you start to feel the energy building and the velocity of that energy buildup. It was like increasing every hour. Like you could just tell there was an electricity in the air. And so by the end of the second day, actually a couple bought it. They bought it for $75,000. I think at that point, the highest number on the ATM machine was maybe $500,000, like not even that much.
Yeah.
But I think they could pick up on like that energy and we were starting to feel it and we're like, okay, maybe this is going to be all right. And now it gets to the public days, day 3, day 4, day 5. And the floodgates just opened up. It got so big. There were so many people crowding around this ATM machine that they made us move it actually one of the days because the crowd was blocking the fire exits. And then they also assigned 5 more security guards to the booth to like keep the crowd calmed down and also to keep the peace because the crowd was getting so big that they were bleeding into the other galleries.
Right.
Which meant they were bumping into the art of the other galleries. Another very interesting phenomenon happened. As like the mass public started to come through Art Basel and interact with the ATM machine, you started to see that it was a performance where someone would go check their balance in front of like an onlooking crowd. And so a couple things happened. One, of course, there would be like the wealthy people swiping, but there would be also like normal people who are like students or just like younger people in general going and like putting in their debit card, checking their balance and having like $37 in their account. And they would do that, pull out their card, turn to the audience, and the audience would erupt in applause, right? It became sort of like, they kind of flipped the concept on its head and it became kind of like, you're one of us and we're one of you type of like
because you are simultaneously, as you said, poking fun at the ultra wealthy and the wealthy. And the crowd naturally celebrated the everyman.
It did. And then to make it even funnier, the person who ended up being at the highest, the top of the leaderboard.
Yeah. Was that 3 million or 6 million? Do you remember?
It was actually 5
million.
And what it was. So imagine like
I do remember like it's a guy and I think he had like a woman and like his significant other like at his shoulder or something.
And they were, you know, very conventionally Miami attractive.
Totally.
Like suit with like maybe one too many buttons unbuttoned. And I remember like the Gucci loafers. I'll never forget that.
Deal sleds.
He's the kind of guy who looks like he takes a selfie smoking a cigar on his yacht. Like that kind of...
Mr. Worldwide.
Exactly. And, you know, lovely significant other. I don't know if they even knew each other. It's sort of like that vibe, right?
Yes.
Whether I judge them properly or not. So he goes and swipes his card. It hits 5 million. They turn around to the audience and it's silence. It was so awkward. And so then they left and like some other kids came and took the place and like got the crowd going again. But that's not the end of the story. 4 hours later, the couple comes back and he swipes again and clocks in at $9.5 million. So clearly in that time,
like he moved money into that account.
Money around to go and do it again. And then again, no one cared, which was the best. It was so funny.
Fascinating. And Diplo also was at the number 2 position for a while.
He was at, I think, the $3 million mark for a while. Yeah. And he was just like goofy with it, which was great, actually.
Well, and you'd expect him, like, he's obviously, it's like not flexing, right? Like Diplo using it isn't, if anything, it's like Diplo's like seal of approval.
Yeah, so that was sort of like Art 101 for MSCHF.
We could go all day with this.
Yeah.
I think it's important just because many people, this will be their only exposure to MSCHF prior to this listen, the big red boots.
The big red boots.
How did the big red boots get concepted?
Yeah.
And what was your method of seeding it so that it hit the acceleration point?
So here's the thing about the big red boots is like, there was no like profound origin moment. We're doing like our normal thing. We're brainstorming, we're sketching. We sketched the shoe, and it's obviously inspired from like certain comic book characters. But we're like, but what if it was real? And we're like, that's such a crazy like looking thing that maybe it would look really cool if it's real. So we started like building the prototype. And when we made the first prototype, one of my colleagues put them on and started like plopping around the office, the studio. And we're like, it actually looks pretty good. Like it looks pretty cool. And like, is it cool now? Maybe not. It got too big. There's a certain like power dynamic with like culture there. But at the beginning, just like wearing those looked so otherworldly and so sort of like, it sort of like really made you question the divide between like real life and virtual, right? It's like, were those Photoshopped? Those look like it was like manipulated, right? It doesn't look real.
Especially because of their material finish and the way that the light reflects off them. They look CGI.
Yeah, exactly. And it just so happens that like someone here, of course, has a motorcycle. And so he was like wearing those boots and put on the motorcycle helmet and like got on the motorcycle and looked like something from Akira. Yeah. Like it, and we're just like, oh my God, we have to do it. Nobody's going to buy it. Like no one in their right mind will buy this, and it's kind of expensive to make. We over-engineered it to like make it fit well and not like wobble around on your foot. Like it really like hugs your foot in, and it was a little bit hard to take off. You just have to know how to slip it off, but like it was well engineered, in my opinion, like to a quality that surpasses like most luxury brands' craft of that type of model. So we over-engineered it. We spent too much money making it. And then we're like, yeah, nobody's going to buy it. I mean, we'll charge $350 because we kind of have to because of how expensive it was to build. But nobody's going to buy it. So we made like 200 or 300 pairs at the beginning. And there's one image in particular that was the kickstart to this. And it was an image, I don't even remember what their name is, because their face isn't in the photo that started it. It was a mirror pic of the waist down of them wearing the boots. And the craziest thing started to happen. Other people started sharing someone else's photo, which doesn't happen on social media these days. That does not happen on Instagram. That does not happen on TikTok. People don't share other people's content. People make content about them reacting to other people's content.
Right.
So this was sort of like a phenomenon that had not happened in at least 5 to 8 years, where someone's actually sharing someone else's content, their asset. And so all of a sudden this became, it meant so many different things to so many different groups of people. The like experimental fashion crowd were really into it, and they were like styling it in ways that actually looked really good. But it so quickly hit the mainstream, and it hit the crowd of people that were like, wait, I can use this as a tool to accelerate my own like creator or influencer or content creation career. If I get this boot and I have it in my video, I'm going to go viral. Like everyone was going viral off of the thing that was going viral.
And it was almost like an accessory that was proof that you were an insider in this trend. Like you
only at the beginning though. Right. And then once it like started to spread, everyone needed it. Everyone got their hands on it. And it just like, it got so big that it killed it, actually. We like called our factories and we're like, how many more can we make over like 6 weeks, right? Let's just see what we can do. Let's do our best. And they gave us a number and we're like, all right, we're going to try to do that. And we still had like way more orders than we could even like remotely manage. But the thing that happened was because we were making these at like a high level of quality, which took about 6 weeks to like get out the door. And that was with us sprinting, opening up new tools, bringing on partner factories and saying, drop everything for the month and like, let's do this. The black market beat us to market, actually. So all of a sudden, like fakes were flooding the market for like $35 before we even fulfilled. And so more likely than not, anyone that you see out in public, in stores, online, is probably a fake.
It's AliExpress. It's
Shein, Fashion Nova. I forget all, like there were so many of them. Ego, like all of these sort of like fast fashion groups.
Remarkable.
Which is kind of a wild story.
Absolutely.
But, it's totally one of those things where it was like the faster that something grows, you get so close to the sun and then you certainly like it dies or it kills you or you kill it.
Jerry Seinfeld, right? I mean, he could have done Seinfeld episodes for years and years and years, but he left at the top because he said, I want to go out at the top. I don't want the phase of this show. I don't want the phase of my career where it's waning.
Totally.
And it's dying. And you have to drop the mic at the top.
And like we never wanted to be a big red boot company.
Yes.
We don't even want to be a shoe company, right? It just so happens that like shoes are a very popular viral medium these days.
Yes.
Right. But we're so much more interested in like everything else, right? Like all of this stuff behind me. Like what are more boundaries that we can push? Like where can we go that's like super uncomfortable, right? Like comfort and predictability is sort of like antithetical to everything that we do and everything that we believe in.
Yeah.
So we had to get out of that game. So we won't, maybe we'll bring them back in like 30 years.
I think I've told you this. But last year I was asked to speak at a Fortune 500 food company leadership team. And as part of that trip, we went to Meta. And so I tagged along to Meta's campus in Silicon Valley in Menlo Park and basically hear about Facebook and Instagram's tools for digital marketers, because this company spends billions of dollars on advertising, and much of that goes to Meta. And they walked us through a case study about what great internet campaigns look like and what real virality is and how to think like a digital marketer. The case study was the Big Red Boot. That was the case study that they walked this Fortune 500 food company
And it's wild because like I don't think we had a profound strategy going into it. But certainly you could argue there's some sort of insight that I'm not acknowleding that we just kind of naturally have.
Strategy is a weird word, but what you have is you have an instinct, you have a sense of, oh, this fits. You also, you described earlier that you have this word, quote unquote, here at MSCHF, distribution, which is not a technical term for conveyance of the product. It is what is the context in which this will light fire.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So you do have really a strategy. Are there any MSCHF works that you want to tell the story of that means something particularly compelling to you?
I think another related concept that's really important to MSCHF is like, sure, you have the idea. It's really important where it goes, where it shows up, how it shows up, what is that context. But then also like the third tier, like the third order of that thought process is what happens once it's there? What do people do with it? And I think in like some of the best MSCHF outputs and some of the works that we're the most proud of, the idea is not complete until it's in the hands of the audience, and the audience has to carry it across the finish line, right?
Into the end zone.
Into the end zone, right. So MSCHF only does part of it, and it's up to the audience to sort of be like our partner to complete the work.
What is your creative process? How do you as a team generate these ideas?
It is the people that we have. Like there's a sensibility of person that ends up here, and there are a lot of people who want to end up here and a lot of people who do not end up here. But the ones who do end up here are sort of like that outsider mindset that I told you about earlier. Slightly subversive, slightly cheeky, slightly mischievous. Like there is just sort of like a archetype of person who ends up here. But also the people who are here are like very chill, very nice, like kind.
I've noticed that.
Smart, right? Like
they're not too cool for school.
No, they're not at all. Like
and I think in the fashion world and the art world, there are a lot of people that are too cool for school. Mm-hmm. And if I could give you a compliment, you are not too cool for school. You are earnest.
Damn. I'm not. I've been trying. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah. That's the thing is like the people here aren't trying to like show up for like the photos. Like they're not trying to be seen where people want to be seen.
Right.
In fact, I think a lot of people here might not really understand how big we might be, and they might not care. And I actually think that's amazing because what that means is when you're thinking about these ideas, you have no masters, right? You are serving no one. You are not trying to please anybody. And so, first and foremost, it's the people who end up here. The second part is the environment, right? Like we are in an environment where you feel like you can make a mistake. You can make a mess here and it's okay. And that's so important, right? And we try to make sure that we have that here. And then the other part is there's just like, I guess back to that personalities part, like there's a language here that people speak in terms of just like a certain level of like highly perceptive, I guess, irony and awareness just about like things that are happening in the world. And we're able to sort of like condense those down into our own kind of like dialect. It's kind of like, I don't know, if you put a bunch of like jazz musicians together in a room who have never met each other, they can probably make music that sounds pretty good immediately.
Yeah,
right?
They can still session.
Very similar thing here.
Do you have any examples of shorthand words or language or concepts that typify that you guys have invented?
Not even really. It just kind of, it's based on the subject matter, it's based on the material, and you just kind of like end up there really quickly.
Yeah.
It just kind of happens.
Yeah.
But then like none of this is useful without the discipline,
yes.
right? Like it's good ideas just don't like come to you. It's not enough to just like wait for them to come to you. It's not enough for us to like sit back on a 5-year hiatus and be like, I was uninspired. So I waited until I had inspiration and now I'm back. You know, it's
right.
We can't do that.
Right.
And some people can, and it's honestly cool when like a musician disappears for like 2 years and they come back with something amazing. That's great. For us, that's not how we operate. And we believe that a certain level of like diligence and discipline to the brainstorm process is actually really important because it's a muscle that you must train. And so we actually brainstorm multiple times a week. We document every single idea. So there's a huge database and library of concepts that we've been discussing for years. And then we have like a very smart vetting process with these ideas based on, does it conceptually represent what we care about right now? Is it doable? Can we afford to do it? Are we going to lose a lot of money on this or only a little bit of money on this? Can we distribute it? Right? There's a lot of like different criteria that we consider with these ideas. And then once we feel good about everything sort of like checking those boxes, we put them in a pool. And then we forget about them for anywhere from 3 to 6 months. So it's
as
like,
a rule, you forget. Yeah. So even if you like an idea, you say, cool, throw it in the icebox.
It's got to survive the test of time. So when we revisit it anywhere from like a quarter to 2 quarters later, you have to feel just as excited about it as you did when you first like thought about the idea.
Phenomenal
and
test.
Then we slot it for production, which typically is 12 months later. And then the good thing is, because we've done this process for so long, we're actually releasing things today that we had been sitting on for almost a year.
Yeah.
So we're already like getting that hit of dopamine now with something that was in the hopper for a long time.
Yes.
While putting new things in the hopper for later.
Yes.
So we've built a system and a world for us to like basically always get our hit.
Yeah.
And it works.
One thing I want to ask you about, I don't know if you've been asked this question before, but shipping high quality product consistently is hard. Mm-hmm, it's hard for even big companies that have a relatively few number of items.
Yep.
You are able to ship digital product very quickly, like a tax prep software. You recently launched the Blob cool version of Dropbox cloud application, right?
Right.
And you're putting out shoes constantly. How do you create an operating tempo and a culture in your company that is able to ship at this speed and at this quantity and quality?
Yeah, it's a good question.
I've never seen anything like
And
it.
I think part of it is I don't know how it should be done or how it has been done at other places. We don't have the reference point. So I think the funny thing about MSCHF is like, because this is the first time any of us really like built a business or built a team or built like an operating model, we derived our own best practices out of thin air. And purely out of like necessity and like constraint, we landed on something that just allows us to be so like athletic in our output. It's a small team. Like the company is under 30 people. We have just enough people in each like core discipline to be able to like excel at every category. But I think we've like wiped away a lot of the bureaucracy. Like we've wiped away a lot of like the meetings, a lot of like, there's just so much like candor here.
Yes.
And like quick honesty and like ability to make fast decisions. Like our design process is so fast. Like tax software, like designing this, and this is just the packaging design, right? This isn't the game or the software or the packaging design for the package that houses this.
Yes.
That would take, if like you were another company that had just like hypothetically raised venture capital and you've hired a branding agency and a design agency to like do this.
It would take 9 months.
It would take 9 months and it would cost so much money. We do in 2 weeks.
So to do this, I mean, one of the things you're talking about is, and you talked about it before, is having a really high bar and also a really right sense of the people that you hire. This group of fewer than 30 people, they all have to be killers. Like not killers in like a...
They're actually really nice, but yes.
Yeah, they're very nice, but they're at the absolute top of their game.
Yep.
Because if you have a 4-person production team that makes everything from tax software to various like portfolio of footwear,
Yep.
they have to be unbelievably agile.
I think we have like the best raw talent, brains, minds in the world here.
Yes.
There are probably fewer than like I can count on one hand people who had established careers before MSCHF. Everyone here, like the majority of people here, were very early in their careers, or this is like job number one for them, truly. Like the raw, just like insight and ability of these people it's like otherworldly.
Phenomenal.
It's incredible.
What a treat.
It really is. Honestly, I don't know if we understand how good we have it, to be honest. Like, I think there are times where I probably take it for granted too, because I never really spent any time at a real company or at a big company.
Yeah.
But we are so lucky, honestly.
Yeah.
Like, it's amazing. It's the dream.
Let's talk about the business planning process and how you kind of approach the business. I've heard you talk about FPP and RPP before, which people won't know unless you explain it if you choose to. But MSCHF isn't just an art studio with an unlimited pocketbook.
Right.
MSCHF is actually a for-profit corporation.
Yep.
And how do you approach revenue and profit and business metrics as part of your constraint set?
Yeah, totally. I mean, we operate with the budget. There's always like a revenue goal. There's a target of money that you need to bring in to be able to sustain just like the operations, the headcount, the rent, all of that stuff. And then there's like a target of money that you need to make to be able to do like bigger things that just don't make money, but are so cool that you have to do them, right? The finance people want to make sure we're making money and following the best practices. But in our case, like worst practices are so important for us to like do this long term. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So it's always like a very careful push and pull. But we have good people internally to like work on that and navigate it. And kind of what you referred to earlier, there is this balance of like the fame producing projects that are truly just like the essence of our souls. Like we must do these things because sure, they might not make money and they probably lose money, but we just have to do it. And that doesn't account for like the time and the labor and the resources to make the website and like build all the technology for it. Like it just, you lose money on those things, but it's so important to do.
What's the role of Asia in brand building?
Good question. Honestly, I'm learning it for myself right now. And I never even really thought about territories or geographies until probably a year and a half ago. Or actually, no, exactly a year ago. So we had always seen like, okay, people are buying our stuff all over the world. There's like 20% international orders, and they're occurring in like all the basically countries and cities that you would predict. Which was actually kind of cool because our stuff always goes live on a Eastern time zone, like 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. and they sell out pretty quickly. So like if you're in Asia, that's going to be really hard.
Yeah,
right?
That's midnight.
It's really, really tricky. So the fact that we were seeing like that velocity of volume of sales was kind of cool. But we never really thought twice about it until last February, a museum in Seoul reached out asking to do like a full retrospective like exhibition of all of our past works since the beginning of MSCHF, which is a cool opportunity because, you know, most artists don't get asked to do a full retrospective until they're 20 years into their career. So we're getting this like 5 years in, and we're like, what's wrong with this? Like, this is too good to be true. Is this a scam? Is this like a fake museum? Is this like that Willy Wonka museum that went viral for all the wrong reasons? But we like background checked it. We like checked our network, and it was totally legit. So we did it. And we had this exhibition open last November. And honestly, we had no idea what to expect. We're like, we don't think we have a big presence in Korea. I'm half Korean, but I'm not like going on Instagram and talking about Korean culture. Like I'm just not present, right?
Right.
The museum show opens, and the opening night, the museum and the museum parking lot was so flooded that like people were spilling into the streets. We broke the record for their opening day attendance. There were K-pop stars showing up in their fancy cars. There were older K-pop stars showing up that like my wife listened to back when she was a kid. The cast of Squid Game was there, like really just kind of like wild. I don't even think it's about like Asia versus like the United States versus like any like kind of geographical distinction. I think what I took away from that is like there is actually like a shared international language of creativity that it doesn't really matter like where you're from or like what language you speak. Like localization, we didn't do anything to localize MSCHF, right? But all those kids that were showing up at that museum opening had so much in common actually with the kids that show up at our New York opening, with the kids that show up at our LA opening. All of them aspire to this ideal of creativity. They hold this on a pedestal as a personal value, the same way that others esteem the ideal of honesty or integrity or hard work.
Yes.
Creativity is like the shared international language. And when we realize that, we're like, wait, this can actually be everywhere. We can be in Korea, we can be in Japan, we can be in China, we can be in London, we can be in Paris. Like it doesn't matter, because this was what MSCHF was building at the end of the day the whole time. And we never even really thought about it because we were just here selfishly to make the ideas that we wanted to make.
As you're saying this, I'm realizing it is different than design, which is applying creativity to solve a problem, creativity and engineering. It is different than art, which is expressive and can often be very personal. There's this saying, creativity is intelligence having fun.
Oh, that's pretty good.
And when you look at MSCHF work, it's just intelligence having fun.
And idiocy having fun too at the same time, right? It's all of it.
Oh my gosh.
But that like Asia, like having that show in Asia, I feel like I matured by a decade. You know,
That is so
it
cool.
was so weird.
In Korea, think about K-pop. These are very corporate entities that develop and train talent. That's very different than like how an independent artist would be discovered and developed here. I don't know if you've ever seen these. There's this magazine. I think it's just called B. which thing is short for brand. And what they do is each issue it's like a profile or portrait or a retrospective of brands. And I think they do it even without the brand's permission. So like IKEA has an issue. Muji
I have
has
heard
an
of this.
issue.
Yes.
And so somebody in Korea, it's a Korean publication that said, let's document the work done by these brands internationally as like artistic retrospectives, and there's something like commendable about that. And so I think I whatever, like sound off in the comments if I'm an idiot, but I think that Korea as a culture has a particular interest in this combination of art and commerce, and is comfortable with the combination of art and commerce as a craft.
There's like I think a general lack of cynicism that you might see more here in the States, and definitely in New York. Whereas like I'd say Korea is just more like joyful and like excited, but they also move on more quickly, right? Like things don't hold as long.
Let's talk a little bit about you personally, and we don't need to go on forever, but I want to make sure to talk about something really interesting, which is that you got into West Point. And I
had to go to West Point, yes.
You attended West Point.
Yeah.
You had to go to West Point. Like, tell me the story of how you went to West Point and then what happened.
Yeah. I mean, so I say I had to go because I didn't get into any of the other schools that I applied to. So the context for the West Point decision was, so I grew up in like backwoods North Carolina. Like literally my childhood was in a trailer, which my parents kind of hate when I talk about that, but like it's true. And fortunately for them, they like saved up their money and they built a house where that trailer was today, which is great. Amazing.
And did your dad build the loft that we're sitting on right now?
He built the stairs up to the loft.
Okay. Yeah. So, your dad is extremely handy and industrious.
Exactly. So he was in the military when I was born. He met my mom in Korea. She was like, wow, he's so handsome. He looks kind of like a young Bruce Willis meets Jack Nicholson, which is true. And definitely was true. So she falls in love. They move back to the States. And then she realizes he has no money and no plan. And so, there's this upbringing of like doing without, being like smart with your resources. Obviously, like, we just didn't like have a lot. And I also grew up in this area where like, you're not around people who ever travel or leave or necessarily like go to college, right? Really like great people. It's just like that part of like small town North Carolina where it's just one of those places. Now, the influence from my mom was kind of like your stereotypical Asian tiger mom, which is you need to become a doctor or a lawyer because they are stable professions. And not only must you be a doctor or a lawyer, you must go to Harvard or Yale to do that. Or Juilliard, which I would say like I was a decent classical pianist, but not good enough. So long story short, I didn't get into Harvard or Yale or Juilliard, but I did go into West Point and I applied there, obviously, from my dad's influence. And so I kind of had...
Did he also go to West Point?
No, but he was in the Army.
My grandfather went to West Point.
Oh, did he graduate?
He did.
Dang.
And then spent a whole career
he
as
probably was hardcore.
He's super hardcore.
Very hardcore. The thing that you get out of an experience at one of the academies is you learn how to do the impossible thing, or you learn how to at least survive the process of being given the impossible task. On your first day, right, like if you get out of line, it's so common to be assigned like 1,000 push-ups. Most people can't do 1,000 push-ups. I could not do 1,000 push-ups. Doesn't matter. Not their problem. The colonel or whoever is like, you have to do it. And you just kind of like get through it, right? The other rule at West Point is, at least while I was there, for every hour in class that you have, you are assigned 3 hours worth of homework. But the thing about West Point, unlike real college, is you're in class 7 hours a day, every single day. So the math doesn't add up.
Right.
And they do that on purpose. Right? Like it's very, very intentional. So you get through that. And I think that was really important because I think most people learn that lesson at some point in their lives, in their careers, in their family lives or whatever. You are given an impossible roadblock and you have to get through it. I just had to learn that at the age of 18. The other thing that I learned was accountability for mistakes. So this was like the most brutal thing, but you operate in like, you live and you operate in like squads, platoons, companies, right? And your squad is typically 10 to 12 people. And the worst kind of punishment that could ever happen is like, let's say if I fucked up something, like
Your squad gets punished.
right, my squad has to get down and do 100 push-ups, and I have to count them out, and I am not allowed to do the push-ups with my squad. And then you have to like look them in the eye afterwards. There is nothing worse than that, right? And so that level of like self-accountability is just like, you are not going to fuck up. There's a weird truth about the military, which is, as an officer, unless you're like in conflict, it's kind of boring.
Right.
And there's a lot of bureaucracy.
Right.
There's a lot of red tape. There's a lot of paperwork. There's a lot of
Budgeting,
inefficiency.
preparation. Yeah.
Yeah. And also like inefficiency is sort of like part of the hazing at the military too. Like
Yes.
it's just part of it.
Yes.
And I was like kind of looking at my 20s, because you have to do like 5 years active and 3 years reserve. And I was like, I think I'm going to get so bored.
Yes.
And I know if I get bored, I'll get in trouble. Like it just won't be good. So I was like,
Very self-aware.
I probably have to get out of here. So I quit and, kind of wandered around a little bit and then started doing this stuff, honestly, as a way to run away from real life. And then this kind of became my real life. So,
Okay, so we're going to go quick fire round now.
cool.
I call this at large and off the cuff.
All right.
So answers are short. Are you glad social media exists, or do you wish it was never invented?
Cop out answer. I don't think it matters. People have always figured out how to like find, consume, and share information that like reflects them as individuals. So it's no different than like cave paintings and smoke signals. It's the same thing.
Do you have any favorite artists?
Not really. And that's just because I don't think my mind thinks about the world like that. Like I'm not really like a fandom person, but there are artists who I've gotten to know over the years who I really admire as people and
Who
I'm
are
friends with.
Tell me those.
I mean, Maurizio Catalan is great.
Oh,
like
cool.
he's actually so smart and he's so accomplished, but he still has this like glint in his eye of he wants to get in trouble. And maybe like one day we'll get in trouble together.
Spirit.
Yeah. There's another artist that we're good friends with as well. Her name's Paula Peavy. And she's also known for just sort of like these really experimental, like non-traditional, like challenging artworks. And she's obviously a lot further in her career than us as well. But there is sort of like a kindred spirit. And I think we're like learning from her too as a friend.
Is there one person or brand that you would love MSCHF to collaborate with?
I think we're in a state where we just want to work with our friends and kind of like enjoy a sense of community around like working with our friends.
Beautiful. Favorite creative tool?
The screenshot tool.
Very good. What is one thing you know to be true and wish the rest of the world understood?
This illusion that to have a creative career, you have to be accepted by these gatekeepers. Like as an artist coming up through art school, you're told you got to get signed by one of these blue chip galleries who are going to like represent you and basically serve as your distribution. If you're a designer, you're told that unless you can somehow merge yourself into that art world and get gallery representation, you're probably going to work at a design studio or an advertising agency, which everyone will admit is like a soulless kind of existence, unfortunately. They can make great work, but you're still making it for the man. There's no two ways about that. I hope that one day people realize like there can be another way.
Yes.
And I'm not saying I have the answers, but hopefully like people seeing that MSCHF is an artist that is capitalizing on the tools that are typically afforded to global corporations and celebrities. The fact that we're like crossing that chasm and tapping into like the context of both of those worlds gives us so much more power and like leverage.
What's one recipe that's your go-to, and walk us through it?
All right, I'll just talk about what I was planning to cook tonight. So kimchi fried rice. It's great. It's like the perfect combination of like tanginess, spicy, a little bit of sweet from the onions. It's like so savory with like the butter and the rice, and then you like burn it on the underside of the pan, sort of like a paella. It's kind of like the perfect late night dish. And if you're good, you can make it in under 30 minutes, which is amazing. I will slice up a bunch of onions as thinly as possible. That's like my preferred tactic.
Scallions like green onions or no, like actual?
Like a yellow onion.
Yeah.
Yep. Probably like a half onion. Slice it up really, really, really thin, and then like cook it in butter. A good amount of butter. A little bit of salt. Cook it down, and then I will add the kimchi to it and start like burning that up pretty good on, I would say, like medium heat as you're like cooking that down. Sprinkle some gochugaru, like the crushed red pepper.
Yep. That's not too spicy.
Not too spicy, to be honest. It's just really good flavor. What else do I do? I'll toss in some green scallions at that point as well. And then I will take the cold rice and smash it into the middle, and then pour kimchi juice on top of that. And then a little bit of sesame oil. And then I like mix it all up, and then I smash it and I crank up the heat as high as possible for like 5 minutes. And then voila, it should be done. And it's like perfect every time. And then if you're feeling really bold, you can like crack open an egg, get rid of the whites, and just top the raw yolk on top of it, and then crumble up some like seaweed onto it. And then it is like the best. So usually what I do is like if I get home early and my wife's not home from work, I'll like cook that, and then you can like smell it in the hallway walking into the apartment, and it's like, all right, great. This is like the best way to wind down on Friday night. Yeah.
And welcome your loved one.
Kimchi fried rice. Maybe I'll make it for you tomorrow.
Beautiful.
We still don't have a place to go, so yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I cannot wait to make that.
Yeah.
Gabe, you have been a tremendous guest.
Thank you.
I admire your creative work, your business mind, and just your human sensibilities. So thank you. Where can people find you?
Can't find me.
Where can people find MSCHF?
You can find us on Instagram. Yeah, Instagram.
At MSCHF.
Just MSCHF. Yeah. Cool. All right, Scott.
Thank you. Thank you for tuning into At Large. Today's episode was produced by Sickbird Productions. Our theme song is Son of Sanford by Motion Worker. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and by email at atlargeshow.com. Follow me at SWH Norton on Instagram and Twitter, and DM me about the guests you want to hear on the show.